We are live and recording.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to the City of Albany Industrial Development Agency Audit Committee meeting. My name is Darius Shanfar. I'm going to act as chair today. Call the meeting to order at 11:30. The first order of business being the minutes, which have been previously distributed. So I'd call for a motion. I guess I'll make a motion for a waiving of the reading of the minutes and to accept them as presented.
Second.
All's in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay, two rules. All right, so the next order of business, while we wait for another member to come, we'll go into the compliance reporting, I think.
Sure, we can go.
It'll be the review of draft 2022 Paris reporting.
Okay, all right.
And for the
So
record,
item B.
we're allowing additional members time to
Correct.
attend to be able to hear from our auditors on that. But we'll hand it over. Tom, do you want to
Sure.
start that?
Sure. So in your packets is a copy of our draft 2022 Paris report for the City of Albany IDA. I want to emphasize that this is a draft and is a work in progress until the end of the month, which is when we are required to submit the Paris reports. And the Paris report is really kind of organized into four areas. So you have the annual report, which we'll walk through, the procurement report, which is a list of all of the agency's procurements, the investment report, much of which you've seen through the investment memo that was prepared earlier this year, and then the real property and personal property transaction report, which again you've seen as approved earlier in the year. If you open and go to the Paris report and you jump to pages 3 through 6, I just ask that members take a look at the listings. This is a list of all of the members, when the term started, and the training, questions about the training and nominations. So if you could just take a look and just make sure we have it right. But that's like I said, it's just a listing. If you go to the next page, it's really just a list of the directors and officers of the corporation. And then following that, it gets really into the financial reporting of the agency, and then a list of all the projects. So a lot of the projects we'll walk through in terms of the jobs reporting, but each project is required to submit information about taxes, the lease structure, and different various pieces of information regarding each project that the agency undertakes. And so that really is the bulk of the report. And before I move on, just see if there's any questions, or Sarah, if there's anything you want to add.
So no, thank you. And I just want to, so what Tom has walked through has gotten you everywhere from page 1 through, you can see we also have the, as he mentioned, the input of our summary financial information that we're going to hear about in a second from our standard accounting audit that is done. That gets placed in between pages 10 through 12, and then we've got the schedule of debt. So we're jumping, after you get through all of that, all the way to page 18 is where the project reporting starts. And that, again, is what people typically think of when they think of the Paris report for IDAs, because that is where you see each individual project's performance as defined by New York State. I'll reiterate that this is a draft because we do have through the end of the month. We will wait until we have the review of our audited financials to confirm the numbers and everything before. I would highlight in the board information section for the two of you, and we'll also make sure, particularly since we have the numbers, the questions related to, do you hold any other elected office, or are you appointed by any other government body? We do have your conflict of interest forms, which is where we've pulled that information from, but those are things to pay attention to specifically in case those things weren't on your conflict of interest form, to make sure that we're getting those right in there. So again, that's pretty standard information. You've seen it previously throughout the year. The project reporting is the next piece up, as Tom alluded to.
Great.
Any questions on those early parts?
Nope.
So in the, if you're following the numbered pages of the draft report, you'll see page 102. That is the last page of the Paris report. And then it jumps into the procurement report, which again is just a listing of all of the procurements that the agency has undertaken throughout this year. And that goes basically, it resets the numbering, but 5 pages. And then following that is the investment report, which is just a series of yes, no questions, 4 of them. And then that concludes the report. The real estate information is actually part of the annual report. And that is just a listing of all of the properties that the agency has title to for the Liberty Park.
Great. Anything else for review of the Paris reporting?
So this is where we would go, instead of going page by page through the 102 pages.
Right.
We typically focus on the summary of compliance reporting, the draft worksheets on the table in front of you, on that 11. Those were submitted to the full board in board-only materials prior to today's meeting. They'll be reviewed again as we continue to get additional information. But that is a good synopsis of where we are, and we can go through that. Andy and Emma have been working diligently. I can really get it out. That's how challenging this has been throughout. They have a fantastic system, but they have been working directly with each of the projects that are actively reporting through the IDA, and we're in incredibly good shape in terms of follow up and follow through from our projects. But I believe Emma's going to walk you through the project by project reporting. This is the first time that we've sort of had line by line eyes on this. And turn over to Emma.
Yeah. So kind of some high level notes. We have 72 active straight lease projects. We're just going to start with the straight lease. We'll keep the bonds out for after. Of those 72 active projects, we have about 66 have reported at least a draft version of their reporting. So in terms of the timeline, our Paris report is due at the end of this month. We started working with all of our active projects in January to try to get all of their information by the end of January, knowing it takes some time, some back and forth. So we are in pretty good shape, 80% of a draft version. We are working with all of our outstanding projects to try to collect information, including working with Hodgson and Russ where appropriate to make sure we have reporting information. Of the projects that we've received reporting for, 80% of them are at 80% or above of their job commitment numbers. So have met that requirement at 80% or above. So
just to jump into some projects that came on board prior to 2016 do not have a recapture clause. Projects that came on after, I believe it was June of 2016 and closed, there is a recapture clause in place that is tied to job creation numbers, amongst other things. So for the purposes of the straight lease review that Emma's going to do, we're going to concentrate on jobs numbers. There are additional related materials that we need to chase down per New York State as backup. If any of those end up missing or are insufficient, we will bring those back at either the finance or board meetings. So there's a lot of wheels moving in the background, but we really try to focus on the jobs piece here today.
I do want to, on the recapture note, just as a refresher, our recapture policy that the board has adopted for projects after 2016 that have applied to us and closed with us after 2016 requires the board to review any project that is performing below 80% of its committed job production. It is only required to review them. So that's what we're doing at this point, is reviewing. The board can take action, a number of different actions on any project that falls below that threshold related to the recapture policy. You could recapture project benefits at the most severe. You could terminate the pilot, or you could amend the pilot given failure to perform on the contract with the IDA. So for today, as Emma walks through, she'll highlight the projects that have a recapture clause as well, to note that as we're going through, and talk through the description of why the project is underperforming on jobs. We do request that in the jobs reporting form of everyone to identify the jobs that have been created and maintained on site, as well as to describe any discrepancy with what they had committed. And so the board typically will take into account whether those things are, like COVID was a frequent flyer in descriptions over the past couple of years, if those things are reasonable explanations for
And just to kind of add to that on the recapture clause, I think only 5 of the projects that are under reporting have a recapture clause in recapture provision in place. So I'll note those as we go.
Great. Hey, Joe. Perfect timing. We are just about to go through the jobs reporting, and we've held off on the 2022 audited financials. So Emma's going to walk through the spreadsheet of projects, and so you're in exactly perfect time.
My apologies, this family incident came up. Sorry.
Can I grab you water?
No, thanks, I'm good. I had to bolt over here.
So as I go, I'll refer to the numbers on the leftmost column. It'll say kind of like those are just numbers internally we use to track the projects, just to make it easier for you to follow along. So starting on line 2, we have 1475 Washington. This is a purpose-built student housing project approved by the board in 2015. It does, this is going to be the final year of reporting in 2023. So this one reported 71% of the committed jobs. They do have a recapture provision in place. They dealt with water leak damages, some increases in property insurance, trying to collect delinquent rents over the last year, and in an attempt to balance their budget, they did end up reducing their staffing a little bit and found they were still able to meet all their maintenance needs. So that's going to be project number 2. Moving down the line, we'll go to project number 11. This is 144 State Street, and stop me at any time if you have questions or if I'm moving too quickly. As Sarah mentioned, Andy and I have been deep in the weeds for months on these, so let me know if you have any questions. 144 State Street, this is the Renaissance Hotel. This one came through the IDA in 2014. They are reporting at 62% of their committed jobs. As expected, this is really in large part due to COVID. A lot of the special events and meetings that had been planned were postponed and occupancy has been down. That's really limited the number of staff on their rosters in terms of numbers in the restaurant, numbers of maintenance. However, these numbers are going up, so they're a lot closer to the pre-pandemic levels than they were the year before. So we're definitely seeing a positive trend. They do not have a recapture provision in place. We'll move down to line 13. So this is 40 Steuben. This was a conversion into a mixed use of commercial and residential. Approved in 2014, it does not have a recapture provision in place. 40 Steuben has been trying pretty hard to tenant out the available space on the first floor. They have signage, they've worked with a lot of different realtors. It's listed in commercial brokers. I think you got additional information you received today?
Yes, so for this project and another one that Emma will get to a little bit further down the list that have had some significant deficiencies in job creations over the years for various reasons. This year we sent a letter to them asking them to formally kind of let us know what's going on and let us know if there's a plan in place to kind of jumpstart the employment on site. So we did just receive a draft letter for this project, so we'll be reviewing that and updating our commentary on this status at the next time we run down this list prior to the end of the month.
So we'll move down to line 16. This is 4-6 Sheridan LLC, another conversion into mixed-use retail and residential. It does not have a recapture provision. This is another project that's been underperforming. The space, the tenant, the restaurant has not reopened in COVID. However, they've continued to pay rent throughout the entirety of COVID. So I believe we're asked for a letter on that one as well.
Correct. The owner has touched base that he did receive our request. He is out of town, but we expect to get something in from him by the end of the week.
On line 17, we have 581 Livingston Avenue. This was the newly constructed senior apartments, the Pine Hill Senior Apartments. We are working with Hodgson and Russ to receive reporting and compliance for this project. On line 21, the Albany Hotel. This is the Hilton on 89 State Street. This one is reporting at 74% of the job numbers. They do not have a recapture provision. Much like the other hotels, kind of what we've heard again is reduced operations. There's been reduced occupancy. They've changed some of the ways that they're staggering schedules, reduced restaurant hours, eliminated mid-stay room cleanings. But again, this is a number that's trending up from previous years, so we're seeing positive growth towards that pre-COVID employment numbers. On line 22, we have Albany Medical Science Research. This was new construction of the commercial office space for biomedical sciences research and development, as well as a parking garage. They are have not reported yet, and we are working with Hodgson and Russ to receive reporting on this project. We'll move down to line 28. So for Fuller Road Management Corporation, this project is reporting at 12% of the original job projections. They did note that so they've reported 29 full-time equivalent jobs. There's actually about 415 people with key card access to the space, so there's more people in and out of the building. The number of full-time equivalents does reflect the relocation of a major tenant, and the project noted that they did authorize the sale of the facility in 2022, in April 2022. We'll move down to line 35. This is Sheridan Hollow Enterprises, which was new construction of a mixed-use commercial project with affordable housing as another component. They are reporting at 75%. They do not have a recapture provision in place. They have two different commercial tenants and who have reported that it's been a really hard labor market, so they haven't been able to hire the amount of people they're trying to hire. They are actively working to increase those numbers, but it's not due to not the need. They just haven't been able to find people to fill the positions on site.
If anyone hasn't had a chance to go by that area, it's unbelievable. There's still a ton of construction happening. I believe it's habitat related, but this was one of the projects that really sparked the redevelopment of that area. It's very impressive to see what's taking place there now. So.
All right. On line 38, we have TMG NY Albany. This was the renovation of affordable senior housing. They are reporting at 40% of their job projected numbers. They do not have a recapture provision in place. They have had several staffing issues over the last year, and they are in the process of trying to fill some maintenance and superintendent positions. And they reported to us last week that they are kind of in the final positions of hiring some new people and expect to have them kind of on site in the next month. On line 40, we have 960 Broadway, LLC. This is the final, 2022 was the final year of reporting for this project. We did not receive any reports from them. We haven't received them for the last few years. We are in the process of terminating this project, and I do want to note there's been ongoing litigation. For Nipper Apartments on line 41, that's going to be the exact same report. It is the final year of reporting. We did not receive a report from the project. There is ongoing litigation, and we are in the process of terminating the project. All right, we will move down to line 47. And so this is Harmony Mills South. The reason I wanted to highlight this in your attention is we've received a really high job projection. So it's a very high percentage. They're at about 1,000% of their original commitment. We've had, Andy and I have worked with the project team. There's been some confusion over full-time equivalent numbers. So we do expect this number to go down. We've had a couple conversations with them and we'll receive reports as that number changes. On line 53, we have 16 Sheridan Avenue. This was a conversion into mixed-use retail residential. This project does have a recapture clause, recapture provision in place. They are reporting at 17% of the projected jobs. The sole commercial tenant has been kind of owner-run with a couple part-time staff. So we've heard, from that tenant that with COVID, they are still rebounding and expecting their numbers to go up. On line 55, we have 420 Broadway. This was the renovation with a mixed-use and residential component. They are reporting at 0%. There's been, they're reporting at 0 jobs. There is a recapture provision in place. We are working with the building ownership to determine the number of jobs on site.
This is Colson's. We know it's open. We know there's people in there. We just need to kind of work with them to finalize that number and get the backup associated with that number into us. So we hope and expect that this will hit or exceed their projection at application time.
All right, we'll move down to line 57. This is Swinburne Commerce LLC. This was a new construction. The Swinburne Commerce is going to be the mixed use with the Equinox and Whitney Young side. There's also another element to the project, which was affordable housing. We have not received reporting. We are actively working with the project beneficiaries. They are working with their tenants to try to get accurate numbers. Those are both large organizations, and they've had some difficulty procuring the backup and procuring the number of full-time equivalents on site. But we will be receiving those numbers soon.
And this did happen last year. It took them a little bit extra time, like Emma said, based on the tenants in place. So we do expect to get this in prior to when we need to get it to the state.
On line 58, we have the Rep LLC. This was a conversion into a commercial theater. They are reporting at 39% of the projected jobs. They do have a recapture provision in place. For the Rep, they really changed the operating model of the theater with COVID, and as they've been rebounding from COVID, they have added in more programming. However, the cafe that had originally been intended to be open and operating daily is instead just open and operating for an event-only service. So that's one element of the reduced job numbers. Move down to line 60. This is 45 Columbia Street Association. This is the conversion with a mixed-use retail and residential, as well as a garage component. This does have a recapture provision in place. They are reporting at 0%, which is 0 instead of 1 jobs. So I want to highlight that number. It's not 0% of 100, it's of 1. We've seen this number before. The garage ended up being automated in construction. So originally it was projected to have a parking attendant. That parking attendant is not needed when we automated the garage. We'll move down to line 65, 61 North Pearl Partners, which is the redevelopment at 61 North Pearl with a mixed-use retail residential component. This project, we are working to get a full picture of what's happening on site. It is under construction. There's a couple small tenants who are operating as well. So we are working with the developers to receive reporting. We haven't received any yet. However, we are in active conversations and expect to have some draft reports soon. We'll move down to line 71. This is Man Realty LLC at 244 State Street or 90 South Swan. It's a conversion of an office building into mixed-use retail and residential. I want to note, so they're reporting at 50% of the projected jobs. However, this project is under construction, so we expect those numbers will increase once the project is online and fully fitted out. On line 72, 21 Erie Association, the conversion of the former Huck Finn's into mixed use with retail and residential. This is similar to line 71. They're reporting at 47%. However, the project is still under construction, including the construction of kind of the major tenant will be a 6,000 square foot brewery and restaurant that has not opened yet. So those numbers will go up, but they are not right now. They're still under construction. So we expect all those numbers to meet full projections. Any questions?
If I could, as we're just sort of framing for questions, We spend a lot of time on the underperforming jobs here. I do want to note, if you missed the Emma's preamble, it's about a dozen of the 72 actively reporting jobs that we are looking at for underreporting in some way, and many of those are residential conversions that are projecting just a handful of property management jobs. And the action that the board took in approving those projects was not necessarily predicated on job production, but on those other community benefits that the project brings. And so for the record, I know you all know this, but just for the record, as we're going through, we are required to really focus on job creation. Being an industrial development agency, that is the major measure in the Paris report. But we do, as a team, work through all of these projects, as Emma had said, regardless of their job production, to make sure that they are still performing on the other pieces that they're looking for. It's why we bring the project updates to you all on past projects during board meetings. Our last one was Honest Way Food Co-op that you had seen, so that we can keep up on that. The team also goes out and does site visits to drop in and ensure that the project activity that was approved is still happening on site. So we do keep track of that throughout, and just also recalling that many of these projects, their scores were based on the other community benefits that they brought beyond, in addition to and beyond the job creation there. At this point, staff doesn't have recommended action on any of the ones that are underperforming based on the rationale that was reported on their jobs report form. Beyond the few letters that we've sent out to say, your space has been vacant for quite some time, please tell us why, and what are your rent levels that you're seeking, similar to projects that we've seen in the past where we've asked those details to be able to encourage tenanting the space. And so just to sort of frame out the report, we have a lot of really good actors that we didn't go through on this list, but you can see them in front of you as well. And as always, you have all of the draft pages of the project reporting in the Paris report in your packets as well, that has the additional detail about the pilot payments being made and the other indicators that are in there. So would love to have your eyes on those as well. But for today, we know that the jobs reporting is the really critical piece.
Overall, I'm seeing here that we're almost 40% more in job creation than the original targets, if you accumulate everything together.
It makes sense to me that, especially some of these where the pandemic probably set them behind with some of the, especially the hotels, that they're just not going to be, and even from my own, from where I'm working, because a lot of my employer, we often are bringing a lot of the outside people who travel come into work. That was really down during the pandemic, so it makes sense that that's on the rebound. So I think that makes sense.
All right. Anything else?
Okay.
So we'll move over to the IDA bonds that we have in place. This is going to be on one of the smaller format sheets. To pull out some of the 30,000 IDAs used to be able to do bond projects, and so these are all older projects. We can for certain, we still can for some projects. It's just not likely and doesn't happen. So these are, have started affectionately referring to older projects as legacy projects around here. So there are a handful that are still on our books before the CRC kicked in. And these are shorter, so I don't have line numbers next to you. I apologize. We'll start at the top with Brighter Choice. This is a really success story. You'll see that they are reporting 79 jobs versus the original estimated 19. Brighter Choice in 2007, when the project first came before the IDA, had a single building, and since then they've opened another school. So that's why that number is so much higher. We will move down a few rows to New York State Research Foundation. Again, I apologize, we don't have numbers. Darius, if it's help, we're looking on a short one. This one is reporting 133 out of the 147 jobs. We are working to kind of understand the picture of what's happening there, and we're working with the project. We'll move down to the Renaissance Corps of Albany project. This one is reporting 6 instead of the original 9 projected jobs. Renaissance what they kind of explained to us is they've been contracting with small local businesses for services. So they are doing a lot of their maintenance. They've essentially instead contracted local businesses instead of hiring the jobs on site. And then finally, in terms of the IDA page, we'll move down to Sage Colleges. Sage Colleges, they have changed a lot of the programs and consolidated departments due to under-enrollment in past years. So they are reporting 336 jobs. Originally, it was 416 jobs were expected. This is kind of the trend we've seen. You know, we're not far off from where we were a year ago. Any questions on those bonds?
We also have, we work in conjunction with Teal Becker and Shermonti to pull in from the various custodial banks the confirmations of year-end balances. So that's also happening as well. I believe we have a good portion, if not all of those in.
I believe we have all of the ones back for the IDA.
All right.
The only other thing, as part of the Paris reporting, we do have a draft performance measurements report. If you want to emphasize that this still is a draft, the numbers that are in here in aggregate are really feed from the numbers that Andy and Emma have been pulling together. So those numbers may change slightly, but the rest of the information is correct and again in draft form. So if there's any edits or suggestions, please give them to us either today or afterwards.
All right. So with that, I will relinquish my chair duties.
Thank you. So, at this point,
I think we're at the new business.
new business, thanks. All right, so do we have any new business for the committee, or?
Well, for the, Joe, if you don't mind, if we could take a motion from the committee to refer the draft 22 Paris reporting, noting that it is a draft, to the full board for its review, we can take care of that piece of business.
Sure, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so moved. Now on to new business.
So we can go to the review of the draft 2022 audited financial statements. Chair, if it's okay, I can introduce Teal Becker, who's with us here today. So we have Stephanie Mumford, Christina Geracia, and Emily Salingo, who's joining us via Zoom.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be there today.
And I just, they'll kind of give an overview of the 2022 audits for the IDA. I just want to say thank you to Teal Becker, thank you to BST for really pulling all the information together since the last time we met as a committee in October. So with that, I can hand it over to
Thank you. As Tom said, I'm Stephanie Mumford. I'm the shareholder on the account for the City of Albany IDA. So I'm going to give you kind of a quick overview of the audited statement, and then if I miss anything, Emily can chime in, or Christina as well. So do they all have a copy of this in their packet?
Yes.
Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to review the draft of the audit. So I'll start with the independent auditor's report. So what we have issued here is what we refer to as a clean opinion. So essentially that the accompanying financial statements as presented in draft form in all material are fairly presented in all material respects. So we performed our audit in accordance with auditing standards in the generally accepted in the United States of America, and also the standards in accordance with government auditing standards due to the type of your entity. We also have to be independent of your organization to perform the audit. And the rest of the audit report outlines more clearly what management's responsibilities for the audit are. So you as management are responsible for the preparation and the fair presentation of the financial statements. And our responsibility is to plan and perform an audit so that we can make assurance to make an opinion on them. The required supplementary information that's included as part of the audit includes the MD&A, which we'll get to in a second, which essentially is management's commentary on what's going on with the organization with some summarized financial information. And then there's also a budget to actual report. In our audit report, we note that we have provided limited procedures on that particular information, and we do not issue an opinion on the MD&A or the budget to actual report. The other piece of reporting, which we'll get into a little bit more detail when we get there, that's in the audit report, is we refer to the report that we're required to issue under government auditing standards. This is just a report that we issue in relation to the internal control over the financial reporting for the organization. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay.
No, I think we're good.
All right, the next piece, which I won't get into the detail, is the MD&A, which, as I alluded to before, this is management's commentary on the operations of the IDA. So we'll kind of just skip over that unless anybody has any questions as to what's in the report. If we go to the statement of net position as presented, so here we see our snapshot in time at December 31st of essentially the assets and the liabilities of the IDA. Most of these things here I think are in line with what expectations are. There's a few items that are still highlighted on the page. These are essentially, I think, still some open items that we have. One of them being the mortgage note receivable and the corresponding mortgage payable. I think we're still in question as to the maturity date of this particular thing. So right now it's in long term. So we're just looking for additional documentation to determine if it in fact is long term or if it should be moved up into current. And then the other item that's still highlighted on the page is the accrued expenses. This has to do with the Arbor Hill Community Center that we're still, I think, looking for some more information on that particular agreement there. The other thing to note, which is different than what we've seen in the past, if you're looking at this analytically, if you look at the property and equipment, we've got approximately 2.6 million. And there's also a corresponding liability that due to capitalize Albany Corporation, the 2.65 million. Essentially, this is the piece of property that was under eminent domain. So the IDA at year end has that property. So it's included in the land number and the property and equipment. And then it's, once we reach, I believe it's the 90-day notice period, then it's gonna revert back. So it's got a corresponding asset and liability essentially on the books at December 31st. Are there any questions for that before I move on? Okay. If we move on to our statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, essentially the income statement for the year, we can see that the agency fees, the revenue, the top line is down due to a decrease in the number of projects that closed in 2022 versus 2021. And then the operating expenses are presented there as well. The only, like the biggest difference between the 2 years was the grant award that was in 2021. That was prior year, it was COVID related small business grants that were there. So the net income for 2022 was $442,000 down at the bottom of the page. I won't go over in detail unless anybody would like me to. The footnotes that are here. Note 1 is just your significant accounting policies. There was no new accounting policies that were adopted in the current year, so this would be very similar to what you have seen in the past and presented on this particular financial statement. Note 2, the mortgage note receivable, that's still highlighted along with the payable. We discussed that's just that wording that may need to be updated due to the maturity date. And note 6, to draw your attention to, this is the disclosure that we have on that $2.65 million piece of land with the eminent domain. So we have to we've got that note disclosure there as to what that transaction was noted. So that's something different that's in this year's financial statement. And if we go to Schedule 1, you can see the budget as presented versus the actual and any of the variances. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay, and then the last report at the end of the financial, this is the report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance. So what happens in an audit that's conducted under government auditing standards is that we're required to gain an understanding of the entity's internal controls related to your financial reporting. So we design procedures to understand the controls. We're not required to test the controls. However, we do report on them, so if anything had come to our attention during the course of our audit that would be an internal control deficiency, either a significant deficiency or material weakness, this would be the report where we would tell you that. We do not have anything that we noted during our audit that was a deficiency in internal control that was required to be reported. The report also talks about compliance and other matters that we look for during our audit in terms of regulations, contracts, and other grant agreements that we audit, and we do not have any findings or anything in terms of compliance matters that needed to be reported. So this report here on internal control over financial reporting is also a clean opinion for the audit.
Any questions for?
And then there's one other report should be in your packets. This is something I'm sure similar have seen in the past. It's our required auditor communication. So essentially it kind of goes through if there was any issues that we had during our audit, we would be required to report them to governance here. So essentially this letter is telling you that we've conducted our audit in accordance with the plan, scope, and timing that we told you we were going to do the audit. We did not have any disagreements with management. We did not have any significant issues that we needed to be reported, no new accounting policies, that we were independent. The one thing to kind of highlight at the bottom of the second page at the very bottom under the uncorrected and corrected misstatement.
Let me
Go
just
ahead.
note, for those of you looking for it, it's at the front of their report.
Oh, sorry.
It's actually before the audit. It's the letter that appears before the audit.
Thank you.
Sure
Okay.
thing.
If you look at the bottom of page 2, the second paragraph under the uncorrected and corrected misstatements, and the very end of this paragraph, we did have one adjustment that we had to make that was material to the books and records that had to do with the transaction of recording the fair value of the land from the eminent domain and the offsetting liability. So that's the only material adjustment that we proposed during our audit. Like I said, we had no disagreements with management. We did not consult with any other in terms of opinion shopping, and we had no other significant matters or findings or issues to be reported to the audit committee.
Excellent, thank you. So do we just accept the report, or do I need to move that, the motion to move that? Well, first, let's say any questions, any other questions? No. Thanks, I'm sorry.
We'll take a motion to take.
Okay, yep, so could I get a motion to move this to the full board, please, unless there, so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Excellent.
And then the last item we have is the review of management assessment of internal controls. And this is at the end of the packet. This is really just the last 2 pages. And this is really just a summary of internal controls and risks. There are no changes from prior years to this. This is part of the audit committee charter.
Excellent. So we, and again, I apologize, this one also has the motion to move forward to the board.
This I believe is review.
Okay, so any questions going through? I didn't have any questions on it.
All right.
All right, so we do it, and then the other, do we need to go to the other reports, or we?
Pretty much got the compliance report as part of Paris review, so we're all set there.
All right, so then it looks like we're, unless any other new business, then we can entertain a motion to close?
Adjourn, yeah.
Adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?